Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today I want to start with something that I can almost guarantee you have heard before.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it is one of those statistics that gets thrown around at dinner parties or maybe a pub trivia night, usually after a drink or two. The claim that 1 in 200 men alive today are direct descendants of Genghis Khan.
Right. It is arguably the most famous statistic in all of popular genetics. It has been the headline of, 1,000 articles since the early 2000s.
Yeah?
Roughly 16 million men, all carrying the Y chromosome of the Great Khan.
Exactly. And it is one of those things that just feels like a settled fact. You hear it, you go, wow, that guy was busy, and you move on. But here is why we are looking into this today. What if I told you that number is wrong?
Or at least significantly misunderstood.
Right, misunderstood. So we are looking at a brand new study, hot off the press, from February 2026. It was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, led by a researcher named Aykan Askapuli.
And it is effectively rewriting the book on that famous genetic legacy.
So the headline here is basically that the Genghis Khan family reunion just got a lot smaller.
Much smaller.
Yeah.
And much, much more exclusive.
Okay, so what is our mission here?
Well, to understand why that number shrank, we have to stop looking at modern people and guessing about the past. We have to go directly to the source.
Meaning ancient DNA.
Exactly. We are going to take a virtual trip to the Ulatau region of central Kazakhstan. We are going to open up the tombs of the Golden Horde and look at the actual DNA of the Mongol elite.
I love a good historical mystery, especially when it overturns something I thought was just a solid fact. But before we get to the new 2026 science, let's step back for a second.
Sure.
Where did this 16 million men number come from in the first place? Why were we so sure about it?
So it all stems from a landmark study back in 2003. Geneticists were surveying the Y chromosomes of populations all across Asia, and they noticed something strange.
Can you actually pause there for a second? I know the Y chromosome makes you male, but why is it so important for history? Like, why not look at the rest of the DNA?
That is the key question. See, most of your DNA is a blender. You get half from mom, half from dad, and it gets shuffled every single generation.
Right.
But the Y chromosome is different. It does not recombine. It passes from father to son to grandson, almost completely unchanged.
So it is like a surname written in biological code.
That is the perfect way to think about it. It acts as a historical ledger. If you and I share a specific pattern of mutations on our Y chromosome, we share a direct paternal ancestor.
Got it.
So in 2003, researchers found a specific lineage. Back then, they called it C3 star, though today it is known as C2M217. And this distinct pattern was incredibly common.
How common are we talking?
In the region of the former Mongol Empire, it was present in about 8% of the male population.
Wow.
Yeah, and when you extrapolate that to the whole world, you get that 0.5% figure, or roughly 16 million men. They called it the star cluster.
And because the timing matched up, I mean, it originated about 1,000 years ago, right?
Roughly, yes.
So they just assumed, okay, this must be Genghis Khan.
It was a very educated guess. The timing fit the rise of the Mongol Empire, and the geography fit the conquest perfectly, but they had a major blind spot.
They didn't actually have Genghis Khan's DNA.
Exactly. They were looking at men living in 2003 and projecting backwards.
But the story made sense, right?
Yep.
I mean, we have all heard the legends about the Khan's, let's call it his lifestyle.
It is more than just a lifestyle. It is a biological phenomenon called social selection.
Social selection, is that different from natural selection?
Very different. Natural selection is survival of the fittest. You have better immunity, or you survive the cold, so you pass on your genes.
Okay.
Social selection is reproductive success driven by power, status, and social structures.
So not survival of the fittest, but survival of the richest.
Yeah.
Or the most powerful.
Exactly. Consider the historical context of institutionalized polygyny. We have records of Jochi, who is Genghis's eldest son. He reportedly had 40 sons.
40 sons, just one guy.
Just one guy. And we have records of his grandson, Kublai Khan, adding 30 virgins to his harem annually.
30 a year? That sounds impossible.
It sounds like hyperbole, but in these dynastic systems, it was institutionalized. When one family holds absolute power for centuries, and that power includes exclusive access to hundreds of women, you create a biological engine.
I see.
The Golden family, or Altan Urug as they were called, held exclusive rights to power. They acted like a pump, pushing their specific lineage into the population at a rate that a normal farmer or merchant never could.
Okay, I see how the math worked for the 2003 study. You have massive cluster of men today. You have a history of super powerful kings with massive harems. It's an easy connection to make.
It was the best theory we had, until Iken Escapuli and his team decided to stop guessing and start digging.
This is the part that really gets me. They went into the mausoleums. This is not just swabbing someone's cheek in a lab.
No, this is the frontier of science. Ancient DNA, or aDNA, is notoriously difficult to work with. DNA degrades over time. It gets chopped up by bacteria, humidity, time itself.
So it's a mess.
A total mess. Getting a readable sequence from a 700-year-old burn is like trying to read a book that has been run through a shredder and then scattered in a muddy field.
So how did they do it?
Yeah.
Because they obviously found something.
They did. They focused on the dense bone of the inner ear, the petrous bone, which preserves DNA better than almost anything else. And they went to the Ulatou region.
In Kazakhstan.
Yes, central Kazakhstan. This was the heart of the Golden Horde, which was the northwestern division of the Mongol Empire.
And they didn't just dig up random people, right? These were high-value targets.
The elite of the elite.
Yeah.
They analyzed 4 specific individuals, labeled CKZ001 through CKZ004. These people were buried in monumental mausoleums, the kind absolutely reserved for royalty.
Walk us through who they found.
First, there is CKZ001 from the Elasha Khan Mausoleum dating to the late 1200s, peak Golden Horde era.
Okay.
But the real headline grabber was CKZ002. This body was found in the Jochi Mausoleum.
Wait, Jochi, Genghis' eldest son, the one with the 40 sons we just talked about?
That is what the local folklore has claimed for centuries, that this is Jochi's final resting place. But science threw a wrench in the gears here.
Wow.
When they radiocarbon dated the bones, the dates came back between 1299 and 1405.
But didn't Jochi die way before that?
He died in 1227, so the body in the tomb is almost certainly not Jochi himself.
Oh, man. That feels like a letdown.
I wouldn't say that. It is likely a grandson or a great-grandson. It is still someone buried in the most prestigious dynastic tomb of the entire region. It confirms that this person was a direct part of that royal lineage, even if it wasn't the founder.
Fair enough. Okay, so we have a prince, if not the king. Who else?
CK003 from the Ayakmir Mausoleum. This one presents a bit of a forensic mystery. It is a male skeleton, but when they opened the burial, there was no skull.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Was he executed? Because I know the Mongols didn't shy away from violence.
That was the first thought. But the researchers looked closely at the neck vertebrae, the cervical vertebrae. If you are beheaded in life, there are distinct cut marks, trauma to the bone.
And here.
Nothing. Clean.
So the head was taken after he was already a skeleton.
That is the leading theory. It implies the skull was removed post-mortem, likely during undocumented excavations in the Soviet era.
Wow.
Yeah, someone probably grabbed the skull as a souvenir or a scientific specimen and just left the rest of him behind.
That is grim. A Soviet-era grave robbery leaving a headless prince.
History is rarely clean. But the 4th sample, CKZ004, is actually a woman, Bulgan Anna, a high-status noblewoman.
Okay.
Her DNA and her artifacts tell a massive story, but for the sake of the 16 million men mystery, let's focus on the 3 males first.
Right, the big reveal. They have the DNA of 3 Golden Horde princes. Do they match the famous star cluster? Are they the fathers of those 16 million men?
This is where we have to be very precise. The answer is, well, it's complicated.
You are stalling.
The 3 males did share a paternal lineage. They were related to each other, confirming a dynasty. And they were part of that broad C3 star group, the same general family tree as the star cluster.
So the 2003 study was right.
Not quite. Technology has advanced massively in 20 years. We can now read the DNA with incredibly high resolution. We can see tiny typos in the genetic code, single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs that we simply couldn't see before.
Okay, so we have a better microscope now. What did it show?
When they looked at the fine print of the DNA, they found that these Golden Horde elites carried a very specific, very rare subbranch. The technical name is C2A1A3 F1918.
F1918. Okay.
Let's just call it the royal signature.
The royal signature, got it. And the 16 million men.
They don't have it.
Wait, none of them.
Very, very few of them. The star cluster that is found in millions of men today belongs to a different, much more common branch of the tree.
I'm trying to visualize this. So the star cluster isn't Genghis Khan's personal line.
Think of it this way. Imagine a massive oak tree. The star cluster found in 16 million men is a huge, thick limb of that tree. But the new study suggests that this limb represents a broad proto-Mongol lineage. These are people who lived on the Mongolian plateau before Genghis Khan. Maybe the Kari clan background or common ancestors of the tribes.
And Genghis Khan.
He and his golden family are a tiny, distinct twig growing off a completely different part of the tree.
So those 16 million men, they aren't descendants of Genghis Khan.
They are related to the Mongols, certainly. They share a deep ancestry, but they are likely not direct descendants of the royal house. The actual club of Genghis is much, much more exclusive than we thought.
That fundamentally changes the story. It goes from one man fathered a nation to one man came from a nation that expanded.
Precisely. It refines the legend. It doesn't disprove the idea of social selection at all. The Golden family still expanded successfully, but the numbers just aren't astronomically high. We were confusing the population for the person.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also makes me wonder about the people themselves. We have been talking about haplogroups and codes, but these were real human beings ruling an empire. What did the DNA say about who they were?
This is where the biology meets the history books. The full genomes of these elites showed that they were primarily of ancient Northeast Asian descent, or ANA.
Which means what in plain English?
It means they were biological transplants. They were genetically Mongolian, living thousands of miles away in Kazakhstan. They maintained that biological link to their homeland despite being surrounded by completely different local populations.
So they didn't mix with the locals at all?
They did, but carefully. The study showed admixture, which just means mixing with local steppe groups like the Scythians and the Kipchaks. And this actually explains some really confused historical reports.
Which reports?
Well, there are old chronicles that describe some Mongol leaders as having heavy beards or lighter eyes like blue or green, features that are not typically East Asian.
Right.
For a long time, historians thought these were just errors or rumors. But the DNA shows that local Western steppe genetics were entering the elite bloodline.
So the royal family was slowly becoming a hybrid.
Biologically and culturally. This is exactly why I wanted to save CKZ004, the noble woman Bolganana, for this moment. Her grave is the perfect illustration of this synthesis.
This is the woman buried with the high-status item.
Yes, she was buried wearing a boda. Have you ever seen pictures of medieval Mongol women? It is that extremely tall, cylindrical headdress.
Oh yeah, it looks almost like a column rising straighter from the head.
That is the ultimate symbol of Mongol identity. But alongside that, she had a golden cup. And etched on that cup was a lotus flower motif.
A lotus. That sounds more Chinese than steppe warrior.
It is Eastern, possibly reflecting Buddhism or Chinese influence, but finding it in a grave in central Kazakhstan shows the incredible reach of the Pax Mongolica, global trade.
That is amazing.
She is wearing a traditional Mongol headdress, holding a cup with Eastern artistic motifs, and she also had a saber and a wooden saddle.
She was buried with weapons.
Absolutely. It reflects the nomadic martial tradition where elite women held real power and were part of the lifestyle. She wasn't just a princess locked in a tower. She was an active participant in the empire.
It paints a picture of a society that was adapting and blending, but trying desperately to hold on to that Golden family identity. And even their religion shows this synthesis, doesn't it?
It does. The Jochi mausoleum itself is fascinating. It is an Islamic-style structure, but inside they found a camel's head and animal bones.
So a traditional animal sacrifice happening inside an Islamic tomb.
Exactly. The culture was a true mosaic. But that powerful identity, this study, forces us to zoom out a bit. If the Genghis Khan signal is smaller than we thought, we have to ask, are there other superfathers out there?
Are there? Or is Genghis just a one-off anomaly?
Oh, he's not alone at all. A study back in 2015 identified 11 distinct descent clusters in Asia alone. Genghis is just the celebrity of the group. For example, have you ever heard of Geokanga?
Geokanga, no, that is a new one for me.
He was a chieftain who lived in the 1500s. He was the grandfather of the founder of the Qing dynasty in China. His specific Y chromosome lineage is linked to about 1.5 million men in northern China and Manchuria.
Let me guess. Same mechanism. Lots of wives, lots of power.
Identical. Institutionalized power passing strictly to sons. There is also Niall of the 9 hostages in Ireland. Roughly 1 in 12 Irishmen share his DNA.
That is wild. But why do these specific guys leave such a huge mark? Is it just violence?
It helps to think of human expansion in 2 modes. The sword and the plow.
The sword and the plow. I like that. Break that down for us.
Plow expansions are agricultural. They are slow and steady. Think of the farmers in the Indus Valley or the Yellow River. Their lineages spread because they had stable food, so their populations grew incrementally over thousands of years. They provide the volume or the background noise of the human population.
And the sword.
The sword expansions are what we see with Genghis and Geokonga. They are rapid, almost explosive. They happen in just a few centuries. A small group of elites conquers a region, displaces the local men, and reproduces at an industrial scale.
So the plow is a slow rising tide, and the sword is a tsunami.
That is a brilliant analogy, and the genetics capture both of them. But here's the catch. We often confuse the two. We see a big group of people, like the 16 million men, and we assume it must be a sword event, a single conqueror.
When it's actually not.
Right. Often, it is actually a plow event, a much older, broader population expansion.
Which brings us right back to the mistake of the 2003 study. They saw a big forest and assumed one man planted it.
Exactly. And this brings up a fascinating point about identity that the 2026 study also touched on. We tend to think of tribes or clans as big biological families. We are all descended from this one hero.
That is usually the founding myth of any tribe, right?
It is. But the genetics often tell a completely different story. The Askapuli study looked at the Zatiru tribe in western Kazakhstan. It is a famous union of 7 clans.
And let me guess, they didn't all share a father.
Not even close. They were completely different. They had distinct paternal lineages, different haplogroups like R1A1A and N1A2. Biologically, they were strangers.
So the tribe wasn't a family at all?
Not biologically. It was a political alliance. They became a family through oaths, shared interests, and politics, not blood. And yet, over time, that political identity becomes just as real to them as the biological one. Identity by descent versus politics.
It seems like identity in the steppe, and maybe everywhere, is a mix of what is in your blood and what story you decide to tell.
That is the cultural mosaic again. The Golden Horde elites were genetically Mongol, but they became part of the Kipchak and Scythian world culturally. The Zatirus were genetically diverse, but became one tribe politically.
So if we look at the big picture of this deep dive, we started with a massive myth. 16 million descendants of Genghis Khan.
And we have arrived at a much more precise reality. The famous star cluster is likely a broad, ancient proto-Mongol signal. The specific royal line of the Khans, that F1918 branch, is a rare, highly exclusive club.
And honestly, I think that makes it more interesting. It validates the history books. The Altan Uruk really was a distinct elite caste that kept itself separate from the rest.
It does, but I have to add one major caveat before we wrap up. There is still one missing piece to this puzzle.
I think I know what you're going to say. We still do not have the man himself.
We do not have the body of Genghis Khan. Legend says he is buried at Burkhan Khaldun, a sacred mountain in Mongolia. The story goes that the funeral escort killed anyone who saw them, and then horses trampled the ground so no one could ever find the spot.
So until we find that, if we ever do, we're still just dealing with proxies.
Exactly. These Golden Horde princes are the best biological anchor we have right now. They are almost certainly his direct descendants. But without Genghis's own DNA to compare against, there will always be that tiny, lingering scientific doubt.
It is amazing to think that we can map the genome of a headless skeleton from 700 years ago, identify the typos in his code, but the most famous conqueror in history is still ghosting us.
It is humbling. Science is incredibly powerful, but history knows how to keep its secrets.
So what is the takeaway here for someone listening who maybe isn't a geneticist? Why should you care about this?
I think it is an invitation to be skeptical of simple answers. We love the 1 in 200 stat because it is simple and shocking, but real history and real biology is messy. It is a mix of ancient migrations, sudden conquests, and political alliances that disguise themselves as families.
And as we learned today, sometimes science comes along and edits the story. It doesn't destroy the legend of Genghis Khan, it just brings it into a much sharper focus.
Genomic revisionism. It is the new frontier of history.
I want to leave everyone with a thought to chew on. Think about your own family tree. If the royal bloodline of the largest contiguous empire in history is rarer than we thought, and if tribes like the Zatiru are actually political constructs rather than biological families, how many other family legends would disappear if we put them under the microscope of ancient DNA?
Or perhaps how many new, much more complex stories would we find?
That is the question. Your genome isn't just a code, it is a living mosaic of history, and we are just learning how to read the pieces. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
A pleasure as always.